Hey 207, I hope you're having an awesome day. I'm going to read you chapter 6 of The Littles. So far, we've met the little family. Here they are. We have Tom, Lucy, Mom and Dad, Granny, and Uncle Pete. They live in the walls at the Biggs house. But the Biggs are on vacation and the Newcombs are living in the house for the summer. But the Newcombs are pretty messy, and because of all the food that's left out, they now have mice in the house. And in chapter 5, we learned that the mice sometimes like to chase and eat the littles. So let's read chapter 6 and find out what happens next. Just a reminder, there is a Kahoot quiz that you can answer after you finish listening to a chapter. Chapter 6. Every night for a week, Mr. Little and Tom watched the Newcombs at dinner time. Mr. Little watched to find out if the Newcombs had seen the mice, and what, if anything, they were doing to get rid of them. Tom and his father hid high above the dinner table in a secret lookout place near the ceiling light. They could see everything that went on in the room. Here, do you see them? So here are the Newcombs eating at the dinner table. Here's the light, and if you look really close, you can see the littles hanging on to the light. We're spying on them, trying to see what they're talking about and what they know. Below them, the Newcombs were finishing their dinner. "I saw a hummingbird outside the study window today," said Mrs. Newcomb. "It was feeding on the iris." "Marvelous," said Mr. Newcomb. "Would you mind passing the butter? That's a rare thing to see, you know. They're so tiny and timid." "And fast," said Mrs. Newcomb. "I moved closer to the window to get a better look, and it was gone in a flash." Mr. Newcomb sipped his coffee. "Dear, don't you think this coffee is a bit weak again?" Mrs. Newcomb nodded. "That's the bird that sounds like a rusty iron gate." Above them, the littles listened. The Newcomb talked about many things. But as usual, neither of them said anything about the mice. "Let's go," said Mr. Little to Tom. "They haven't seen the mice." Father and son climbed out of the lookout place. They walked across the ceiling between the rafters. Both were armed. Tom was carrying a bow and quiver full of arrows. Mr. Little had a sword. He was carrying a lighted candle. "What can we do?" said Tom. "The Newcombs see birds everywhere outside the house, but inside, where the mice are, they never see anything. Are they blind or something?" Mr. Little sighed. "I don't know," he said. "Mice are quick animals. They're not easy to see, and they usually do most of their work when the people aren't around." "Hey, I have an idea," said Tom Little. "I know how we can get them to see the mice." "How?" "It's easy. We can—" Just then Tom's father stopped. Tom, following close behind, bumped into him. The candle fell from Mr. Little's hand and went out. Mr. Little reached for his sword. Is it a mouse?" whispered Tom. "Shh!" Quietly, Tom took an arrow and fitted it to the bowstring. There was a scratching noise in the wall ahead. Mr. Little and Tom stood still, tried to see into the blackness. They listened. When Mr. Little had heard enough to know it was a mouse, he whispered to Tom, "I'll stand here. You hide behind that heating pipe. As soon as the mouse reaches the top of the wall, I'll light a match." He took a deep breath. "If he runs to attack me, shoot him with your bow and arrow. Don't shoot unless he attacks. The light might frighten him away." "What if I miss?" said Tom. "I have the sword," said Mr. Little. "The mouse will have to get awfully close for you to use the sword," says Tom. "That's why you better not miss with the arrow," said Mr. Little. "Now go." Tom Little felt his way through the dark ceiling space to the pipe. He drew the arrow across the bow and pulled the string back with all his might. Then he aimed into the darkness towards the sound of the scratching. The noise grew louder and louder. From the sound of it, Tom thought the mouse was climbing near the Little's tin can elevator. He hoped the mouse wouldn't gnaw through the string. The boy had never seen a mouse. He had never, of course, heard many scary stories about them. He was ready for something terrible. Suddenly, there was a burst of blinding white light, his father's match. Shadows danced. Tom Little blinked. He saw the mouse. It was climbing over the top of the edge of the wall. Its eyes were like black mirrors, shining back the light of the match. Tom forgot what his father had told him. He didn't wait for the mouse to attack. Instead, as soon as he saw the beast, he shot the arrow. It flew through the air and struck the mouse in the foreleg. The mouse squealed. "Nuts!" yelled Tom. "I forgot!" He shot another arrow. By that time, the mouse had climbed over the wall. It was struggling to its feet. The second arrow hit him in the rump. It squealed even louder. The arrows didn't stop the mouse. It crawled towards the light. A low, gnarling growl came from deep inside its throat. Mr. Little stood his ground in the middle of the ceiling space, 4 feet away from the oncoming mouse. In one hand, he held the sword at arm's length, pointed at the mouse. In the other, he held the burning match high above his head like a torch. Then he lowered the match torch and pointed it at the mouse. Suddenly, the mouse turned and limped away. That is the end of chapter 6. Do you think you would be scared if you were Tom and you were face to face with the mouse? What would you do? Would you shoot him with the arrow like he did? Maybe you'd run away?